5 years ago, she was a hip or some kind of a surgery, whatever. Went and called the rabbi, and she had been responsible for years. The Jewish cemetery is like a separate corporate from the conservative synagogue, which is kind of fun or whatever. Anyway, but called the rabbi, said, I think I'm dying. I want to do. I'm ready to die, and I want to do the prayers. And he said, well, I've got a call in, come tomorrow. And she says, well, I want to do it now. Let's do it in front. So the next day he comes to the rehab. She wasn't sure she wanted a rehab. She goes, no, I decided I'm not dying then. Oh. Okay, but this time she was on home hospice, and they called, and his sister and brother were there. We weren't there yet, and holding her hand, Rabbi came an hour later.
I'll make him Gabby or something. Yeah. We'll just start. I'll move things. Okay. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Welcome to those who are here on Zering Family Field. Welcome to those who are here with us virtually. It's nice to be here together. It's nice to greet you while I can still greet you before Tisha B'Av. So I guess schmoozing encouraged. We are on page 214 in Siddur Lev Shalem, or wherever you find Shabbat Mincha in your Siddur. We begin on page 214 again in Lev Shalem. 558 in the big Sim Shalom. Ashrei Yoshvei Beitecha, Od Yelelucha Sela, Shem Shekacha Lahu, Ashrei Aham Shadonai Elohav, Teilah David, Armim Chamim. Teilat Adonai Yidaber Pi, Vivarech Kol Basar Shem Kodsho Leolam Va'ed, V'anachnu Nevarech Yamei Taviad Olam, Hallelujah, Ovad Tzihon Gorel Shavifesh B'Yakov Neum Adonai. V'yatakadosh Shevti Lo Tisrael, L'karazel Zevi Amar, Kadosh 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 Adonai Tzvahot, Melech Kol Haaretz Kevoto, Ablin. V'tisayini ruach v'shma charai kol rash gadol, Baruch kevod Adonai mimekomot. Adonai lo le'olam va'ed, Adonai. Yivtechu b'cha Yudei Shemecha, ki lo azavta Torashecha Adonai. Adonai chavetz leman tzidko, yagdil Torah v'yatir. Yikata v'yikata shemer haba, v'yamad yivrach yirtei, v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayichon, v'yamechon, v'chayidechu beit Yisrael, v'chalav isman kari, v'imru amen. Yehi shemir haba mevarach, v'yalam olmei hayah, yibarach v'yishabach, v'yipar v'yishman v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalei v'yitalal, shemit tekudesha berich, u'le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, Shishbechata v'nechamata, Damiram b'yalma v'yimru, Amen. V'ani tefilati lecha Adonai et ratzon, Elohim b'rov chastecha, Aneni b'emet yishecha. V'yihi b'neso Aharon, v'yomer Moshe, Kum Adonai v'yefutzu oyevecha, v'yenhusu mesnechan mipanecha, Ki mitzion teitzei Torah, u'devar Adonai miYerushalayim, Baruch shenatan Torah le'amo Yisrael, b'kedushato. Gadlu l'Adonai hiti, u'nomim hashmo yachtav, l'cha Adonai hamdullah. Ramemu Hashem, Ramemu. Do we not know this tune? Ramemu Hashem Eloheinu, ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho, ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. Ramemu, Ramemu Adonai Eloheinu, ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. Ramemu, Ramemu, Ramemu Adonai Eloheinu, ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. Ramemu, Ramemu Hashem Eloheinu. You may be seated.
Sure. Jen said that she would. Do you want to get by Shani? Thanks. No, there is not. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It feels like just a few hours ago that I was saying, please turn to Parshat Devarim, and now here we are in Parshat Ve'etchanan. So we are going to be on page 1005. Marshall will be reading for us. And sure. Is there one around? Great. ותיגע לוותר מלכותו לנו מזמן קרוב ויחום פתתנו פליטת עמו בית ישראל לכנו חסר רחמים ורצון ונאמר אמן הכבוד והנשנו כבוד לתורה יעמוד נתן שריאל יהודה בן חיים וטובה ללי הראשון ברוך שנתן תורה לעמו ישראל בקדושתו ואתם הדבקים בין עליכם האם כולכם היום
Baruch Adonai Baruch Leolam Va'ed Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Baruch Rabanu Mikol Hamim V'natan Lanu Et Torato Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah Bo'etchanan El Adonai Bo'etahi Lemor Adonai Elohim Ata Achilota Leharot Et Avdecha Et Godlecha V'yadcha Chazaka Asher Mi'el Bashamayim V'aretz Asher Yasech Masecha V'chigvurotecha Eberana V'eret Haaretz HaTova Asher Be'ever HaYarden Hahar HaTov Hazeh V'Halevanon Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Natan Lanu Torat Emet V'Chayei Olam Nata B'Tochenu Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Va'ed Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Hamim V'natan Lanu Et Torato Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah
Vayidaber Adonai Bilaman'chem V'lo Shama Eli Vayomer Adonai Eli Rav Lach Al Tosef Daber Eli Od Badavar Hazeh Ale Rosh HaPiska V'sa Einecha Yama V'tzafona V'teimana U'mizracha U'even Einecha Ki lo tavor Et HaYarden Hazeh V'tzavet Yehoshua v'chazakehu v'yametzehu ki hu yavor lifnei ha'am hazeh v'hu yanchilotam et ha'aretz asher tir'eh v'neshev bagai mul beit peor v'yata Yisrael Shema Elochukim v'elam mishpatim asher anochi melamed etchem la'asot leman tichyu uvatem v'rishtem et ha'aretz asher Adonai Elohei avotechem noten lachem lo tosifu al hadavar asher anochi mitzaveh etchem v'lo tigra'u mimenu lishmor et mitzvot Adonai Elohechem asher anochi mitzaveh etchem Einechem haraot eit asher asad Adonai b'Baal Peor ki chol ha'ish asher halach acharei Baal Peor hishmido Adonai Elohecha mikirbecha v'yatem hadavekim b'Adonai Elohechem chayim kulechem hayom.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chaye olam nata b'tochenu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
And as our third aliyah is coming up, I just want to point out that the last verse that Marshall just read is the line that we repeat back when the Gabbai is beginning the Torah service. So we call the first person up, and then everybody in the community says, "Ve'atem hadvikim b'Adonai Elohechem haim kolchem hayom." And we just read that as the last verse in Marshall's second aliyah.
ורד בת שרה וישראל, דוב בן חיה וזליג.
וזליג לעלייה השלישית.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים ונתן לנו את תורתו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
ראה לימדתי אתכם חוקים משפטים, כאשר ציווני אדוני אלוהי לעשות כן, בקרב הארץ אשר תרתם באים שם על רשתה, ושמרתם ועשיתם, כי היא חוכמתכם ובינתכם לעיני העמים, אשר ישמעון את כל החוקים האלה, ויאמרו רק על חכם ונבון הגוי הגדול הזה, כי מגוי גדול אשר לו אלוהים קרובים אליו, כאדוני אלוהינו בכל קוראינו אליו, ומגוי גדול אשר לו חוקים ומשפטים צדיקים, ככל התורה הזאת, אשר אנוכי נותן לפניכם היום.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת, וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Ya'amad hamagbiya. Do we have a golelet? Oh, we have a golelet. That's okay. Ta'amad hagolelet. Please rise for lifting and wrapping of our Sefer Torah. Oh, you bring your own chair. Full service.
Well, somebody needs to.
Yeah. Vezot HaTorah asher sam Hashem lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai beyad Moshe. Eitz chaim hi lemachzikim ba leTorah ve'ad leRushay. Eitz chaim hi lemachzikim ba leTorah ve'ad leRushay.
Hashivinu Hashem, Hashem Elecha, Nashuvacha,
Chadesh Yameinu, Chadesh Yameinu.
Is there anybody who has a male to be marked this particular week? So Stana, do you want to come forward and have the male said?
El Malay Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hamasei Menucha Nilchona Tachat Kanfei Ashchina, B'malot Kedoshim Utorim, Kizohar Harakia Mazhirim, V'nishmat Tamar Rusia Bat Yetidja Umalka Shehalcha Le'olama, B'gan Eden Tieh Menuchata, Ana Bal Harachamim, Hasti Reha B'Seiter Knafecha Le'olamim, Usteror Mitzaror HaChaim Et Nishmata, Adonai Hu Nachalata, V'tanuach B'Shalom Al Mishkava B'Nomar, Amen. You want me to hold it?
Yeah.
You want me to say it?
I want you to say it, yes, I can't see.
El Malay Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hamanasei Menucha Nichona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, B'malot Kedoshim Utorim, B'kizohar Harakia Mazhirim, L'nishmat Idol Bat Aharon Ubacha, Shehalcha Le'olamaha, B'gan Eden Tehi Menuchata, Hana Bala Rachamim, Hasti Reha B'Seiter Knafecha Le'olamim, Usror B'Sror HaChaim Et Nishmata, Adonai Hu Nachalata, V'tanuach B'Shalom Al Mishkava B'Nomar, Amen.
Amen. Stan and Val, we were remarking yesterday what a coincidence and what an odd sort of celestial coincidence that your parents would have left this world on Tisha B'Av, and now you have their yard sites together, and so they're bound up. Literally, when we say Utzor B'Tzor HaChaim, like, they're bound up in the bounds of eternal life. They really are bound up calendrically together. Is there any memory that is coming to mind that you wanted to share, or simply that?
I just want to say that almost my father as well, and that would have totally freaked me out. But he made it to the 14th of Elul.
He made it to the 14th of Elul. That's pretty remarkable. Well, may their collective memories be for a blessing, and may you find strength again in holding one another as you hold their memories each year. Is there anybody else who has a Male to mark who's here in person? Okay, so I'll take this back, and we turn to 221 in our Lev Shalem. Hallelujah, Shema Tunai, Kiniskav Shemo Levado, Dollars Vishamayim, Vayarim Garen Lehamo, Tilai Chochasi Dav, the Nave Sir, like hallelujah, the David Mismore, let her not hear it's Mluah. Uvnu Chol Yom Har. Hashivinu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva chatishamenu kekedem. Even as the ark is close, you remain standing. If you're in Lev Shalom, as we are on the field here, we're on page 222. Immediately following Chatzi Kaddish, we move into the whispered private Amidah. Those who are able to remain standing, please do. Again, Chatzi Kaddish is on 222. And then the next page, we begin our whispered private Amidah. Yitkatav, Yitkadash Mirabah, Yamati Vrachir, Tevim Lichokute, Bechaychon, Yamichon Chayid, Chobit Israel, Bagalabisman, Karivim Ruamein, Yishami Rabah, Mivarach, Lialam, Umeam Haya, Yishbarach, Yishtabach, Yishbar, Vichman, Vitnase, Yishadar, Vitalev, Vitalal Shemid, Kudishabiri, Hule, Lamin Ko, Berkatav, Shirata, Jishbachatav, Nechamata, Damiram Bilma, Vimru Hamein. If you haven't yet completed your own private Amidah, please continue at your own pace. The repetition of the Amidah begins on page 223. When we reach the end of the Kedusha on page 225 with the blessing Ha'el HaKadosh, you can be seated. Again, we're on page 223. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu Elohei Avraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el HaGadol HaGibor v'Hanora El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim v'Konei HaKol V'Zocher Chasdei Avot U'Meviku El Livnei V'nei L'man Shemo B'Yahava Melech Ozer Fokeid U'Moshiach U'Magen Baruch Atah Adonai, Magin Avraham Folkei Tzara, Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai Mechim Eitim Hataraf Le'Oshia, Mechalkel Chaim B'Chesed Mechim Eitim Merachamim Rabim Zomech Nofelim V'Rofech Cholim Matira Asurim Umchayim Emunato L'Shnei Afar Micha Mocha Bel Gevurot Umitom Elach Melech Memitum Chayei Matzmiach Yeshua V'Neman Atah L'Chayot Beitim Baruch Atah Adonai Mechayei Ametim Nikadesh Shimcha Ba'olam Kishim Shemati Shemoto Bishmei Marom Kakatuv Yad V'Yecha V'Karazeh Sefi Amar Kadosh 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 Adonai Tzva'o B'Lochol Haaretz Kvodo L'Matam Baruch Yomeru Baruch Kevod Adonai Mimekomav Divrei Kodshecha Katuv Leimor Yimloch Adonai Le'olam Eloheich Zion L'dor v'dor Hallelujah The Torah Jornagi God Lechal Netzach Netzachim Kedushatecha Nakdish V'Shivchacha Eloheinu Mipinu Lo Yamush Le'olam Va'ed Hil Melech Gadol V'Kadosh Ata Baruch Ata Adonai Ha'el HaKadosh Atacha v'shimcha echad, u'mikem chag v'Yisrael goy echad ba'aretz, tiferet gedula v'ater tishua, yom nucha m'tusha lemcha natata, Avraham yagel Yitzchak ernein, Yaakov uvanav yanucho vo menuchat atava undava, menuchat emet v'muna, menuchat shalom v'shalva v'shket v'vetach, menucha shlema shatarot zeba, yakiru v'necha v'yidehu ki mitecha hi menuchatam, v'yam menuchatam yakdishu et shemecha, Elohim Elohei Avotenu, Retzim Menuchateinu, Kadeshenu b'mitzvotecha, V'tinchel b'shoratecha, Sameinu mituvecha, V'samecheinu b'shoratecha, V'tahir libenu levdecha be'emet, V'nchilenu Adonai Eloheinu, B'ahava v'ratzon Shabbat kodshecha, V'yanuchu v'Yisrael mekadeshei shemecha, Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh ha'Shabbat, Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu, B'yamecha Yisrael levi tfilatam, V'yeshevet avodah Techa, which be the Tom Biafa, take a bell bird, son to the son to meet over Dutch Israel, Amecha, Vitechazei, Nainu, Bishubachal Zion Barachami, Baruch Adonai, Amachasir Shechina Toletzion, Modim, Hatov kilo chadarach amecha v'amrachem kilo tamu chasadecha me'olam kivinu lach v'yakulam Yitvarach v'yitramam shemcha malkinu tamid le'olam v'aya v'chol ha'chayim yidu chasel v'yilinu et shemcha be'emet ha'el yishoteinu v'esrateinu set la baruch Atah Adonai Hatov shemcha v'chanei le'odot Shalom rav al Yisrael ha'mecha v'yol kol yishavei tevel tasim le'olam ki atahu melech adon Lechol hashalom v'tov v'necha levarech et amecha Yisrael v'cholei tuvchosha b'shlomecha Baruch atah Adonai havarech et amo Yisrael b'shalom. Kaddish Shalom is found on page 230. Yikadav, Yikadash Merabah, Me'amad Yivrachir, Sevim Lichmachute B'chayichon, V'mechon V'chayit, Uchol Beit Yisrael. Bagalach, V'zman Karivim Ru Amen. Yehi Shemei Rabah, Mevarach, Le'elam U'mehom Maya, Yibarach, V'yishabach, V'yipar, V'yishma V'yitnaseh. V'yitadar, V'yitalev, V'yitalach, Shemei Tukudisha, B'rich, U'le'elam in Kol Berchata, V'shirata, Jish B'chata, V'nechamata, Damira, Be'omha, V'imru Amen. Yikabat, Zolodon, Chol Yisrael, Kadam Avuhadi, V'yishmai, V'imru Amen. Yesh Lamar, Rabah, Rabba min Shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'romav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon ha'kol. Kakatu b'torah Adonai imloch li'olam v'hevenemar v'haya. Adonai v'melech al kol haaretz b'yom hahu yihyeh Adonai echad u'shmo echad. Mourner's Kaddish is found in Lev Shalem on page 232. Yit gadal v'yit kadash shemei rabbah. V'yamad divrach irutei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayechon v'yomechon uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael. Bagalau v'zman kari v'imru amen. Yehi shemei rabbah mevarach le'olam u'lamei amaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yitalev v'yitalal. Shemei dekudsha berichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushvachata v'nechamata. Damiram be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabbah min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Shabbat shalom again, everybody. So you can be seated for just a second so I can let you know what our plan of operation is. Today on the calendar itself is actually Tisha B'Av. It's actually the day on which we commemorate the destruction of both temples, historically speaking. But because it's Shabbat, Tisha B'Av, as it's observed, begins this evening and moves into tomorrow. This afternoon, we are blessed with a guest speaker. And I'll say more about that in a few minutes. But in order for us to give our fullest attention and also to do the other thing which we really need to do, and that is to nourish ourselves before we move into one of the two 25-hour fasts on our calendar, then I want to release you so that you can go into the line to get some food for yourself. I want to say just one quick word about that, actually two quick words about that. The first is that the fast itself, just in case there are those of you who hadn't had a chance to look it up and to whom that's important, the fast itself starts at 7:50 p.m., so it begins before Shabbat ends. We actually begin slightly before Shabbat ends. That's one thing. And then the second thing is just to note that though there's not a true Suda Mafseket that happens when we move from Shabbat into Tisha B'Av, there's not a true pre-fast meal that happens. We do have hard-boiled eggs out, and I'm always moved when the meal itself speaks to the situation. You know, every single Saturday afternoon, we have the same thing here. Right? We have, you can come here I encourage you, come every Saturday afternoon. We have bagels, we have spreads, and we have some fruit, and we have some dessert. But we also have out some eggs that remind us of the circularity of life, which also includes within that circle of death. And I encourage you to get your food on the quicker side, meaning schmooze as you wish in line, but please do get yourself some food and get seated again so that in the next 8 to 10 minutes, we can get started listening to our special speaker who I'll introduce in just a few minutes. So same goes for you at home. Please do feel free to go line up, and the food is just in the back there, and then come grab a seat. And please get comfortable so that we can have our guest speaker.
Rabbi Charney?
Yes.
Hi, it's Miriam on Zoom.
Hi, Miriam.
Hi, can I ask a huge mitzvah? My battery died
Yeah.
just before Aleinu, and I'm in the year of mourning. I don't know if we could do Kaddish again.
Yeah. Yeah. When we can do a Kaddish D'Rabbanan. Can we do a Kaddish D'Rabbanan in just a bit after we regather? Are you staying with us, or do you want to do it right this moment?
Could we do it now? Is that possible?
Yeah, we have 10 people who are paying attention. We can certainly do that. So I'll turn to a psalm, and then we'll just do Mourner's Kaddish. Give me just a moment.
So
Well, we'll just do Mourner's Kaddish. I'll turn to a psalm. Give me just a moment.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. Yeah. So we have somebody who's on Zoom who missed out on Kaddish for technical reasons and literally technical difficulties. And so I'll invite those who are able to turn in your Sidurim that hopefully you still have in front of you. If you can turn in your Sidurim back in the listing for Kabbalat Shabbat, if you turn to page 27, we have the Psalm for Shabbat, and then we'll say Mourner's Kaddish in just a few moments on page 30. So page 27. Mizmor Shir Lihom HaShabbat Tov Lehodot Ladonai L'Samir L'Shimcha Ha'Elyon L'Haki B'Boker Chastecha V'Mourner's Kaddish. Odin huvum beseva desheni varananimi hu lehagi ki ashar hadron haitzuriva lo havlata bo. If you're in the Lev Shalom, we're on page 30 or wherever you find Mourner's Kaddish. Yit gadal v'yit gadash shemei rabba be'alma divra chirute v'yamlich malchute b'chayechon uvyomechon uvchaye dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala uvizman kari v'imru amen. Yehi Shemei Rabba Mevarach Le'alam Ulamei Omaya Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitpa'ar V'yitramam V'yitnaseh V'yithadar V'yitale V'yithalal Shemei Tekudsha Berichu Le'ela Min Kol Birchata V'shirata Tushbachata V'nechamata Damiran Be'alma V'imru Amen Yehi Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya V'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. All right, we'll gather together in just a few moments. Glad we were able to do that briefly. And in about 5 to 7 minutes, we'll come together and do some learning. Please grab something for yourself to eat or drink or both.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
We have a bar mitzvah. Bob's dad's retired. My brother's retired. The next 2 weeks, okay. I talked to Fred. Mayor and Leanne and Noam are out of the country with no parents. Her dad turned 72 on his 70th years ago. It was COVID. They wanted to take their family to Ireland, so they went now. They flew out Thursday. Good timing. Yeah, yeah. And David and the kids are fine. Where do they live? They live on Kibbutz Sod. They're right near Sderot. They're between Sderot and Netivot. That kibbutz, I had forgot, I had looked it up. It was the first B'nai Akiva kibbutz. So, but they're, you know what? The kids, everybody's sleeping. They got 2 safe rooms in their house. So, you know, the parents will sleep with the kids. That's what happens. I know the older ones are aware enough and they get a little scared, but they're good. My guess is this weekend was a very good. When David was commuting to Jerusalem all week until Friday, because he works in the International Prosecutor's Office. Yael is on maternity leave because Shira is barely a month. And
So, vacation time this summer?
but Israel says it expects the fighting to go on for a week. That's what she said. You read? I'm hoping it ends earlier, but you know what? They obviously had some information. Oh yeah. Well, that's what it sounds like. My guess is we're not going to get all of it because it's community. But I think you're right. I think they had information. I just hope it ends sooner than later because if it's positive,
All right, everybody. I hope everyone has had an opportunity to get something to eat, something to drink, and you can keep on eating and drinking while we're gifted with this presentation, this important presentation. I'm very, very briefly going to introduce the person who is going to introduce our guest speaker. Temple Beth Am has many long-standing partnerships with important organizations around Los Angeles. One of those long-standing social action partnerships is with Jewish World Watch, which you'll hear a lot more about in a moment, but one of its main objectives is to take the resources that have been pointed in the direction of Jewish communities in peril and to use those resources to lift up other communities that are facing crisis. And we are very lucky to have with us this afternoon Serena Oberstein, who is going to introduce to us a guest who is present to help us contextualize the entry into Tisha B'Av, which is a holiday on which we confront our story of destruction and peril as a people, and to contextualize it in a contemporary, current, awful, real, ongoing, and in need of advocacy situation on our planet, to attune us and to allow us to put human names and faces and to create new friendships with people who can tie us person to person to that story. So without any further ado, I want to invite Serena to introduce our guest speaker to us.
Hi, good evening. Let's see if I can. All right. This better? I hope I can. All right, no hands. Hi, everybody. I'm Serena Oberstein. I'm the Executive Director of Jewish World Watch. We are an anti-genocide and mass atrocities organization that was founded in 2004 as a Oh, sure. It's better? Okay. All right. All right. That's... All right. Yeah? Both of them? No, this is good, right? Okay, great. As I was saying, we were founded in 2004 as a response to the genocide in Darfur. And now, almost 17 years later, genocide and mass atrocity have never been more prevalent. Rooted not only in our history of persecution, but just as importantly, in our Jewish traditions and values, we feel obligated to ensure that never again is a call to action. We fulfill our mission through 3 pillars, focusing first on education here in the US with teens, a brand new college program that's launching in the fall, and of course in our shuls and houses of worship. We also have empowerment projects in more than 5 countries, mitigating the consequences of genocide and working to prevent genocide recidivism. We have projects in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, negotiating child soldiers and sex slaves out of captivity, providing comprehensive medical, psychosocial care, and job training to victims of mass rape and nonviolence, education for both children and adults, as well as food security in Chad with Darfuri refugees who are still living in a place of liminality more than 18 years after being forced from their homes. Our final pillar is advocacy. Primarily federal legislation, but also we do a lot of work here locally because the California economy is so large. Our advocacy campaigns are currently focused on the Rohingya, an ethnic Muslim minority from Myanmar, Burma, who were forced out of their homes by the same coup who overthrew Aung San Suu Kyi. We're working in Tigray, which is in the northern region of Ethiopia, where there is a mass forced famine and gender-based violence against victims as young as 8 and as old as 80. And of course, our biggest human rights advocacy work is focused on the Uyghur genocide. The Uyghurs are a Turkic-speaking Muslim ethnic minority group, primarily living in China's northwestern region known as East Turkestan, and also Xinjiang, which means new frontier. The latest crackdown against the Uyghur people at the hands of the Chinese Communist Party happened in 2017. But the scapegoating, the mosque razing, the dehumanization, the othering has been going on at least since 1949. As too many of us know, genocide doesn't begin with death camps, but that's where we see it heading. China has built an expansive infrastructure of concentration camps and Uyghur slave labor factories. More than 2 million Uyghurs face re-education, torture, sanctioned rape, organ harvesting, cultural eradication, and death. While the world reacts in horror to the Uyghur crisis in China, these stories are deeply familiar to the Jewish community. Reports of Uyghur people being taken in the night, having their heads shaved, children being separated from their families, being transported on trains are stories we know too personally. And while the stories are similar, so are so many of the companies reportedly committing these abuses while re-perpetrating their previous offenses. Volkswagen, a company founded by the Nazis that used Jewish forced labor in its factories, today operates a factory in Xinjiang with more than 600 Uyghur slaves. Hugo Boss made Nazi uniforms, and today they source their cotton from Uyghur forced labor. During the Holocaust, Coca-Cola created the Fanta brand because they could no longer evade US sanctions and bans on doing business with Germany in the camps. Today, it operates a bottling plant in the Uyghur region. IBM, which facilitated the Nazi regime's generation tabulation of punch cards for national census data, ghetto statistics, train traffic management, has at least 3 suppliers using Uyghur forced labor. More than 800 companies documented in various reports import goods made with Uyghur forced labor. Acts of evil individuals led to the death of more than 12 million Jews, Romanis, homosexuals, and differently abled people. But it was the indifference of the world that enabled their actions to perpetuate. The question at the heart of Tisha B'Av, when the Jewish people mourn immense historical loss and tragedy, we must ask ourselves, out of despair, where do we go? This is what defines us. So many that Jewish World Watch works with are exiled from their homes, surrounded by brokenness. Tisha B'Av is not just a time to reflect on the past, it's a time to ask ourselves how we came to such brokenness and how we can work together to cultivate repair. We must mourn the atrocities, the baseless hatred that has led to the genocides of the Uyghur people, to the Rohingya people, the othering and the dehumanization of the people of the Congo, and the exile of Darfuris for more than 18 years. A friend, Rabbi Adam Greenwald, once told me a short story about a Jesuit theologian who wrote that just as bread needs to be broken to be shared, so too our struggle and our grief has the capacity to open us to one another and soften our hearts. When the rabbis of the Talmud taught that the Messiah would be born on Tisha B'Av, they were reflecting a similar belief that out of darkness can come new possibility for light. And so it is fitting that on Tisha B'Av, we are about to hear from my friend and colleague, Dr. Nurnisa Kurban. Nurnisa, a Uyghur LA board member, is the principal of Harold McAllister High School, a school that provides opportunities to continue learning for young pregnant teens. She's worked in LAUSD for more than 17 years after earning her doctorate of education from USC and an MA of educational leadership and teaching credential from CSUN. Nurnisa came to the United States from Kashgar, the Xinjiang Autonomous Region of China, in 1997. Much of her family still resides there, although she's unable to be in contact with them. Her name, Noor, means light. And despite the heavy load that she carries, she continues to bring wisdom and shine light on the importance of human rights for all people. Please join me in welcoming Nurnisa.
This is not good. You already teared me up. I haven't started yet. Good evening. Assalamu alaikum. Yaxshimsiz. My name is Nurnisa Kurban. I'm so happy to be here. When Serena called me, I was like, yes, Serena, take me. We were just having conversation on our way here, and we're talking about the questions about Uyghur genocide and kind of, my questions, really. And the part of it is that since 2017, I was telling everyone that our lives have changed forever when the atrocities that were still taking place in East Turkestan. That's the name that was named until the Chinese government took over in 1949 and named us Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, and Xinjiang means new territory. And Eastern Turkestan is the name that people like Uyghurs, Kazakhs, and other minorities who live there prefer, and it has been forbidden. And then also the question came, why now? Why Uyghurs? And the misconception about Uyghur genocide. And I guess my understanding also has evolved since then, because in the beginning, when people talked about or asked about Uyghur genocide, I tried to explain to them in terms of the Belt and Road Initiative in Central Asia and how the Chinese ambition in terms of being a superpower kind of came to play. And then I realized that no, the genocide didn't happen or didn't start in 2017. It happened way back then. And I witnessed it. I had witnessed it, but I didn't really internalize it because I was living in it, right? So I was born in the beautiful city Kashgar. I don't know how many of you were aware of or know about the geography there. It's south part of East Turkestan. And I knew that that place was very special because when I grew up, and the city itself it kind of kept the religious, some sort of, like cultural aspect of Uyghur life. And after I came here, when I learned more about my history, which was not allowed when I was there, I learned a lot about myself, a lot about my ancestors here in America. It was the testament to my ancestors, right? Besides the struggle and challenges and persecution that they had to endure. And they were somehow able to manage to keep that culture and identity for me and for us there. And I'm just so proud and I felt so lucky that I was able to spend 18 years of my life there and learn who I was, learn my culture, learn my language, and literature and history that were not taught at the school that I was educated, but through the family values, through the community that I grew up. And 18 years of my life. So, and then I reflected back on that I was happy child because my family, I had 4 siblings and my dad was an engineer and my mom was an accountant. And then I kind of thought about what I learned from kindergarten to high school, right? And I remember my red pioneer tie and pledging for Chinese government and denouncing religion and pledge my loyalty to Communist Party. And there were 10 commands that I have to memorize every single day before we start learning. And then there was but one thing that I kind of felt that was a good thing was that everything was translated into Uyghur, even though I was learning the wrong thing, but I was learning through my language. And I'm proudly say that I guess I'm literate. So I went to Xinjiang University. That's one of the universities I spent there for 5 years of my life. And the schools were separated. The departments were separated, were Uyghurs in one class and my Han Chinese classmates were another class. And they had to do 1 year, 4 years of college, and we had to do 5 years because we were required to learn 1 more year of Mandarin. And then I also saw that my Han Chinese classmates were able to find jobs very fast and before they actually graduated. And we didn't know what to do. We didn't really know where we could find jobs. And that I witnessed, but I didn't internalize it until very late. And so one person change our lives, and one of the professors from CSUN, she went to Xinjiang University to learn our culture because her focus was Native American culture. So somehow she found connection with Central Asian ethnic groups, Turkic ethnic groups. And then she met my ex-husband and said, if you learn English and pass TOEFL, I'll help you to go to university in America. And that was that. Because we were not provided the opportunity to learn English. We never had English classes. So he followed her and he learned English and he opened up a English class and I started there in 1992 and we saw the sign. That's how we ended up here. And sure enough, he passed and we had 3 families in Northridge. The first Uyghur community consists of 3 families. We all went to CSUN because of her. And she didn't ask anything in return. Anything. So our lives have changed forever. And speaking of Uyghur communities, in Los Angeles, we only have 300, 400 people. And I guess I am one of the veteran community members here. So you can definitely tell how small our community is, right? 300. The school that I used to work, we had 2,500 students. And so when 2016, my father, who was finally allowed to leave the country after 2000, went to Turkey where my older brother lives and my niece got married. So he was 80 years old back then. So he came to Turkey and then my brother brought him over here to see me and my younger brother. And so he was very happy to see us. And in October, and he wanted to go home. And I said, no, Dad, just stay. Stay, I'm gonna be on break, winter break, and I would take care of you. And he said, no, I have my passport now. And I will come back. We will come back and we're gonna go to Turkey together. So I said, okay. So he left. And a week after, somebody came to his house and took away his passport. And then you started to unfold that every single Uyghur, we're talking about millions, we are talking about 13 million Uyghurs. Whoever holds passport, they have to return their passport to the local police station. Everybody. And that's what my dad said. And then I heard other people were saying that, well, my dad called, my mom called. So that's how it started. And then 2018, there were kind of anxiety about it within our community where there was a rumor or rumors that their family members were questioned and people were taken away. There was a concentration camp where they're building a big buildings and they were gathering everyone who were considered suspicious, meaning if they have family members overseas, like myself, or they were too religious, if they have their beard longer, or they had beard or mustache grown, or if they have a scarf, and if they prayed, went to mosque, or went to Mecca, they were asked to report to police station and being questioned. And the March 8th, I remember that was 2017, March 8th, that was a International Women's Day, and in China, that was a pretty big deal. And that was the day that the women were allowed to take a day off and have, party, whatever. So that was the day that I called my sister. I have older sister. She was still working for the government as an accountant, and she didn't answer her call. She didn't answer my call. And I called her again. So a couple days later, my dad called my younger brother who lives in Corona, saying that, tell your sister, don't call your sister, my older sister. Don't call her. Don't call her. You can call me once a month. Don't call her. So that's that. And then I have a WeChat app that had all my friends, my college friends, my relatives, about 100 people. And slowly they just started to disappear. They defriended me. Everybody ghosted me. And the thing is that I can't really call, or I couldn't call anyone to call what happened or ask them what happened. Nobody would tell you because apparently somebody was listening. Just 1984. So then my information that Serena just shared with you just came out through news, the reporters who went underground and took like a video and then just released, or somebody's testified, and that's how we got our information. And there was no way for me to verify. And so we're heartbroken, and we were devastated, and we didn't really know what to do here in LA because I'm in education and I don't know much. We don't have any resources, so we were that's bad news here and there. And we learned that our professors were taken away, all the educators, and they started to burn our textbooks, a curriculum that we were at least able to learn about some sort of history in the context of literature. And so we're like, you know what, maybe we should reach out. And just 4 or 5 of us started to reach out. And one thing that we did was we just signed up for USC Book Fair and hoping that people would listen and help us and tell us what to do. But we really didn't know what to do. And what's interesting that the variety of people who came up to us was in very different level in terms of their awareness or knowledge. And some people did know what was happening. And some people didn't even know who we were and how to pronounce our names. And it also tells you volumes, right? And 13 people living in west part of China, and they said, you're part of China, you're Chinese. Okay, but where are we, right? So 1/6 of the land belongs to us. They dig up natural resources, technology, and we're not there, we're not in the picture. Our community was getting smaller and smaller. So based on the statistics, 95% of the population were Uyghurs back in 1955. Right now, maybe 30%, 40%. But the Han Chinese population has kept growing and growing. And when you go to Urumqi, the capital city, you'll be amazed. It's just like, New York City. Right, and the city that I was born, it was very traditional, cultural, the city that every visitor has to go, tourist has to visit, otherwise it wouldn't count that they went to visit. So that's how I remember. And they started to demolish all the buildings and kicking people out from their houses. And mosques, you saw pictures, and I remember just Facebook, right? The social media these days. They upload those pictures, and people like, oh, really? Is that what's happening? Shame on you, China. For me, 2 days of losing sleep, crying, heartbroken, not knowing what's going to happen the next day. To me, it's trauma. Not knowing where my sister is, my family members. And then one day we went to one of the events, just kind of wandering around just like a child and tearing up, like, tell us what to do, help us. And then we saw a person from Jewish World Watch. And that's how we ended up pairing up. And that was the first demonstration that I went to in front of federal government building. And everybody in Uyghur community in Los Angeles, we were there. And we were so excited, so excited. And then KRLA came along and they organized some events and we were there. Went to every single mosque and talk about genocide. Talk about what was happening and talk about, pledging for help. So the progress has made, as you know, and bills passed, and there's a labor Forest Law, and just I can't thank you enough, Serena, your organization, how much work and effort they put in. And 2020, March, my father, I guess my younger brother, kind of call time to time, once a month, and he didn't pick up his call and on his cell phone. So we were very, very worried because my brother was out there, we were out there, and we get excited, we come up, we talk to people, and then the next day, and we were just, don't know what's gonna happen because we know how Chinese government is. And all our family is still there, right? So it was a very, very long 2 weeks for us. And then eventually my dad called, I picked up, and he said, well, 2 police officers came, and they said that I talked too much on the phone with you guys, which was not true. That's only maybe 2 minutes. We were very, very careful. We just wanted to hear him. And he said, don't tell your sister not to call me. You can call me once a month. Don't tell her not to call. So I guess that was the last time I heard about my father. And then on May 19th, I woke up just as usual. You wake up, and instead of praying, we just look out on Facebook and see if there's any news. Sure enough, there was a news that my dad passed away. And my family members could call me. They could call me. They didn't. They couldn't. So the news kind of flew to capital city, one of our relatives, and then went to Germany, one of the relatives, and then went to Turkey. That's how my brother found out. And 48 hours later, I found out that my dad passed away. My dad passed away heartbroken. My dad raised 5 children after my mom passed away in 2000. And he was everything to us. He did a good job. And he deserved better. Yes, he was 84, but was healthy, and he deserved better. And I still don't know how he passed away. And I really hope that he forgives us. And it's not just me, it's everybody, This is the life that we live in. And some of our family members, friends here, they know, some of their friends or families disappeared. They couldn't dare to share because they were afraid, and I would too, when you talk about them, and if the Chinese government finds out, and if they want them to be released from concentration camps. And it's because there's no guarantee that if you have to, it has to come from them, and there's a lot at stake. So I guess it's really hard for me to kind of, I don't know, I go up and down, right? And I have a full-time job, and it's a little challenging, I have to say, dealing with teenagers and LAUSD is not easy. And then I have my own life, right? And it's been too long. It's been too long. And I hope my sister is okay. I hope my family members are okay. And one thing that I noticed from our communities, and in the past, we would talk about, who was sentenced to death penalty, like our professors, our people that we know that we looked up to, and they were all gone. They're gone. And then our famous artists and, intellectuals. And imagine people who are like normal human beings, that they're not elite or influential, and how many people are still there, and who's doing their cause, who's speaking for them, right? So in terms of trauma, we also realized that it's really hard to talk about it every single day. And then we were like doing our best to bring a normal life for our children. And one thing that we're doing as a community is that we're expanding our Sunday schools to teach our language and music and art and history. And then we're doing picnics so that we all get together and just bring some sort of normalcy. And we don't talk about this. We don't talk about this. Because we talk about this for 25 hours. It's like 24/7 ongoing. And that's where we're transitioning. Our community is transitioning to just create the space for ourselves. I don't know the progress have made, I mean, because of everybody, who was involved and who cared for us. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to do anything by ourselves because we're just don't have any resources. And we do have a bigger population here in Virginia, and they're doing a pretty great job in terms of collaborating with other organizations. But we haven't heard anything about that the Chinese government closed the concentration camps. We haven't heard anything about people who were sent, like millions of people that disappeared. And I haven't been able to get information from my family members. And we have some death in our community. Their fathers passed away, mothers passed away, sisters passed away. None of us, all of us here are citizens, United States citizens. I have United States passport for 20 years. I can't go back. Nobody. So here I am. That's my story. Thank you very much for having me.
We're going to give people an opportunity to ask Nornisa some questions, which Serena is going to prime. Really, we'll have Serena asking the questions, but if we have some questions also from all of you, we're going to open ourselves up. I know all of us want to give a collective hug as well, being present to her story, but I'm also aware that we have about 8 minutes left before the fast formally begins. So I want to give people an opportunity to grab those last bits of water for those of you who are entering that fast time. And so let's take that physical break to go and stretch and breathe and then come back to our places. And then we'll enter into a little bit more inquiry as we're present to this story. So let's take those few moments and then we'll come back to answer a few questions as well. as we prepare to come back together in just a few moments, I also wanted to tell or remind people that due to some of the odd circumstances of Tisha B'Av and Shabbat falling together, that your after meal blessings at Birkat Hamazon will take place individually. So we sort of move into Tisha B'Av as individuals, even though we've eaten this meal sitting around here. So you can do that on your own, staggered as you move into the eve of Tisha B'Av. And in just a moment, we'll come back into conversation with our special guest, with Nornisa, and we'll continue until about 8:10, 8:15 when we begin the transition into Tisha B'Av itself. So as we come back into conversation together, I'm mostly present to this conversation as a listener, as a learner, as somebody who is open to learning what advocacy and action I'm capable of doing in real time. I'm very aware that the poetry and the liturgy of this day that we're about to move into is attempting to do for us what your story is doing for us in real time. So you are bringing to us with complete, honest, and raw humanity what it is like to have an experience of witnessing decimation, of being present 24/7 to this trauma, of waking up every day and trying to figure out what diaspora means for your people and preservation of culture and community. And our people have been trying to figure that out for a couple thousand years, and still we come back to every year and we try to recapture what did it mean when we first faced that kind of destruction, and bring ourselves present to this feeling that we are responsible whenever that takes place in the world to, at the very least, pay attention to it, and certainly when we're capable to do more. And we really, before you come back to this microphone, we want you to know that we owe you a debt of gratitude for reaching within yourself, because you're doing more for us than any poem or book can do on the page by sharing your story live. So thank you for bringing yourself, your whole self, up here. So we're going to bring Serena and Nornisa back up here to be in conversation with each other a little bit. And then if we're able to make space and time for enough questions, then we'll also invite some more questions from all of you. And hopefully this is the beginning of a beautiful relationship with Nornisa and with the LA Uyghur community, so we can continue the conversation after this as well.
Hello again. Okay. Well, thanks again so much for showing up and listening. I want to, I want to think about sort of one of the things Nernisa and I talked about when we were driving over, and something you said, something I mentioned briefly, but you talked about how the history of the Chinese Communist Party and that the Uyghur genocide didn't start in 2017, that it started in, at least in 1949, that cultural erasure happened. So can you talk to us about sort of give us a little bit deeper of a history?
Sure. So I guess this is also kind of like a learning curve for me as well, because the oppression, the colonization of Chinese Communist Party against Uyghurs, I guess I'm putting my own experiences and my people's experience into a context, right? In the terms of genocide, what is genocide? So, in the beginning, in 2017, I never spoke about Uyghurs. Nobody invited me to speak, and it was since 1997 when we were students at CSUN, and people would ask me if I were Latina or nationality, and I would say Uyghur, and nobody would pronounce it, nobody heard about it. And then I would add Turkish. And they were like, oh, are you from Istanbul? I said, no, I'm from East part. Like I had to literally show the Chinese map and pinpoint where I was from. And then I have to mention Tibet. And then they're like, oh, Tibet, right? So you can tell the struggle that we have experienced under Chinese regime and how people don't know about it because we were not allowed to be present. We were not visible. I didn't think about that way, right? And since 1980s, when China opened up its door economically, and obviously everybody benefited except us. And then when I came here, I was like, wow. And the first thing I remember, I went to a mosque in Granada Hills on Rinaldi.
Oh yeah, I know where that is.
Right? And there was adult school, so we didn't have a car back then, so somebody drove us. And I saw a church across the street, and I saw a synagogue on down the street, and then I saw a mosque there. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Actually, people can live together. And I never forget that moment. So you can tell that I was ignorant because I was not given the opportunity to learn the truth, learn about myself, learn about the history in the world. So everything that I learned was propaganda. And I have to unlearn it and relearn it. So in terms of misconception about Uyghur genocide, I think I blame Chinese government for just leaving us in the dark, right? And then in the meantime, and a lot of times when people say about genocide, then they kind of like, we were talking about massive grave, right? And we don't know. Because again, 3 million people disappeared. Where are they? And there was a satellite image of concentration camps and the place that they, burn bodies, and those are things that it came up, and you can also connect the dots, right? And I'm dreadful. I'm dreadful that when time comes, and what I'm going to discover, what is left. And the Chinese government is so good in propaganda too, because of their economic power. They influence, especially the countries that totally rely on them, Muslim countries. And I remember 33 Muslim countries, they supported China. They denied Uyghur genocide. And they saw the picture, they saw how we were persecuted and labeled as a terrorists. And they just sat there, just watched, right? So again, there are a lot of things that I'm still learning and reflecting on. And I ask your intake in terms of what do you see, because your line of work is incredible. You can kind of like step aside and kind of observe and have that meaningful conversation, right? I am in it. So I can't really detach my like present emotion too. So I'm just very angry. I'm angry, I'm disappointed most of the time. And it just like everything just stops. Things are moving, but they're very, very slow. Very slow.
Yeah, I'll address what you said. From my perception, I think, Jewish World Watch, we work on a lot of genocides and mass atrocities, and there hasn't been one to date that has been where I've had such a visceral reaction. And there is the systematicness that we see from the Chinese Communist Party against the Uyghurs that, as Nernisa said, it didn't start in 2017, where, there are rat cartoons for Uyghurs, right? There are images of Uyghurs being swept up looking like rats by Han Chinese people. It's horrifying that that's happening again. In the time leading up to the Holocaust, and I'm not making a comparison, I'm not saying that this is the Holocaust, but make no mistake, the infrastructure that the Chinese Communist Party has erected is as systematic and as egregious, where the locking up of intellectuals, the destruction of books, arresting people for innocuous crimes like having a beard or wearing a prayer shawl, and the way that China has, like Germany, made itself integral to the world, where they make the same arguments. They say we're cleaning up crime. These people won't assimilate. They use arguments around ending poverty by putting people into forced labor camps, and so that's something when I hear about it happening, when I read articles about the system of when someone is put on a train to when they arrive at a train station, for how they're taken off to when their head is shaved, it is it's horrific to me. And it's again, there's this, I think the misconception of what is a genocide, right? Because there aren't mass graves. But when you have cultural erasure over and over, and people aren't allowed to know where they came from. I when we were driving over, I told Nernisa the story of the dreidel, as my father told it to me, which was Jews weren't allowed to study Torah. We weren't allowed to teach our kids our history, and so we would go into the forest and we would take dreidels because we were allowed to gamble because we were counterculture, right? We've always been counterculture. And when soldiers would come, we would cover up our books and we would pretend we were gambling. And there's something about, Nernisa not being able to know her own history, to not be able to do anything that would enable her to have opportunity, but to always remain an other. That is so striking. And now, since 2017, as people are being disappeared, as people are losing contact with their relatives, I think we're headed in a direction that,
if this isn't genocide, I don't know what is. I mean, thank goodness the international community has called it a genocide. But I think that when there's a misconception, right, that's the biggest one, that people think, well, there are no mass graves. And again, as you said, we can't see inside. We only have drones. We only have images of people in concentration camps. And so I think that's one of the things that's most striking for me. I want to ask you a question. You said something about not being able to talk to your family because people were listening. Can you tell everybody about the minders and the Han Chinese uncles?
Oh, I guess that started, I think, since 2014, 16, because how I was able to go back and visit, it's another story. It's a pain, even though I am no longer Chinese citizen. It's just going to Chinese consulate, and when you do the application, they read your name, and then they speak to you in English. I would respond in English, and then the birthplace, China, and then they just completely change their attitude. They close the application, and they will tell you we'll get back to you. We'll get back to you because we have to check a background, and we have to call the police station back home, and then we'll let you know. And then the police would tell my dad that your daughter is coming. And then my dad would tell, okay, you're approved. You're going to go home for 1 month. I cannot have a, extended stay. And going back there, it's another story. So I guess I kind of...
The minders. And
the
uncles,
minders.
yeah.
So then when I was there, that was in summer, and I took my 2 daughters there too. And I've noticed things were changing dramatically. That was the last day of Ramadan. And I remember when I was a child, the men would go to mosque, and we would clean houses, and the day of, waiting for fresh money from my dad and my brothers. We would just wait eagerly and cook, clean. And then we would have meal together. We would visit cemetery and families. And that was the experience that I wanted my daughters to see. So I took my daughters there. And what happened was that my nephews, my niece were required to report to school. They locked down the school along with teachers and government employees so that they wouldn't go to mosque to pray. So they waited until 10 a.m., only elderly and people who don't work for the government, the elderly people or good standing, they were allowed to go to mosque to pray. And it was like my dad and myself, we were just there. So the memory that I had and I wanted my daughter's experience, it was gone. And speaking of minders, and that time, my sister was sent to a village to live with the villagers. My sister, I hope she's still working and well. And then there was a movement where they were asking male government officials to move in to the villagers' houses because their family members or their males were in education. It wasn't called education camp, but they were somewhere studying Chinese propaganda. They're cleansing their spirit because they were so contaminated with the religious extremism. So now, and then after 2017, the news came out, and you see most of the guys were gone, the men in the family were gone, and they moved into the family for the female and their children to live with harmony or live, and I don't know what the agenda is. And that was one of the things that they expedite since 2017.
Right. The minders and these uncles they're moving into Han Chinese homes, and in the Uyghur region, Uyghurs are able to have fewer children than Han Chinese people. And so they're moving Han Chinese men into single female households and stopping them from having Uyghur babies, but instead shifting the culture. Before, well, actually, I'm going to ask one more question, then I'll open it up. But can you tell everybody about the Xinjiang police files? Yeah, I asked her to talk about the Xinjiang police files. There was a document that was leaked about a month ago, and it.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say it very briefly, but what it is it's the first time that any government documents have been leaked from the Han Chinese government that talk about their plans, their intentions, their genocidal intentions, their shoot to kill orders, and there are actual photos of thousands of prisoners and why they've been arrested and why they're in jail. But maybe you can elaborate.
Yeah, it's just like one village.
Right.
Just one village.
Right, it's a village of
just
people.
thousands of people in one village. Imagine if you multiply, there's so many villages and so many, the communities and the counties. Yeah, I remember clearly seeing a 7-year-old was in concentration camp and shaved, and the oldest was like close to 89. 89. And I didn't read it until I calm down. And that's my struggle now. I buy all the books. I bought Sean Roberts' books. I bought everything, and Nuri Turkel's books. I have a stack of books, and I'm having a hard time opening and reading it. So that day, I had the day off. I had the day off because the village that that Xinjiang files disclosed was 40 miles away from my house. And I was afraid to, and we have some family members, relatives that close by, and I was afraid to see anyone that I would recognize. And that was it's very exclusive, and how do you remember the crime that they had, right? It's from, and then there were pictures about torturing tactics and how they torture them, and what the crime was, just praying, and reading books,
Not
drinking alcohol. 7-year-old.
I want to open it up. Oh, great. Okay, maybe should I bring this over, or well, let's see if you can project the gentleman in the front in the plaid.
Well, I guess I don't have a one answer, and I'm also exploring what else we can do, like how can we stop this, right? And obviously, just organizing systematically, like how Jewish World Watch is influencing in terms of policies and action steps, and just tell people the ways that they can get involved, and that can be one way of, just supporting. And I just don't really know, to be honest.
I can jump in. Yeah. So I would say there are a couple of things. Nurnisa alluded to different policies that have been passed over time. So, Jewish World Watch, I think we first partnered with you and with Uyghur LA just to get recognition of genocide. And then we worked together with Uyghur LA and then 80 plus organizations, international organizations led by the AFL-CIO and the Workers' Rights Consortium to get the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act passed, which passed and was signed into law by President Biden in December of last year. It went into effect on June 21st. We still need it to be implemented. So Customs and Borders and Department of Homeland Security have a list of companies, which is, I would say, not substantial enough. Almost all of them are Chinese companies. None of them are the 800 companies that we know have some level of complicity, which you can actually look up. You can look up companies if you go on Jewish World Watch's website. We have a Uyghur forced labor database, which uses corporate supplier lists, government documents, all of the reports that have come out. So I would say, one, call your representative and tell them to strongly enforce this act. That's if it doesn't get enforced and companies aren't punished, then they can continue to support the Chinese Communist Party and continue to perpetuate Uyghur forced labor. The other thing I'll mention, and I know you guys are hearing, I know this community is so amazing and has an Afghan circle of community, and you're talking tomorrow with Hayes, who's a great partner of Jewish World Watches. There is another bill called the Uyghur Human Rights Protection Act. Uyghurs who live here, some of them fled persecution. Some of them have turned themselves into ICE to avoid going back. Some of them came as students, and now their parents are in concentration camps. They are at risk of extradition. Turkey, where there is the largest refugee camp of Uyghurs, Turkey is now forcibly extraditing people back. So if the Uyghur Human Rights Protection Act passes, it would expand priority to emergency status, which is a refugee or asylum status, to Uyghurs living in this country and then potentially internationally. So I would say those are two ways. And then the third way is if you're interested in talking more, have a house party. Invite Nernisa and I to come and speak. And, I think it's important to just keep talking about this. So, yes.
Oh, no doubt about it.
You said the one China policy is harder for your people.
Yes, I mean, we were just having that conversation in terms of, what would be the better solution for our cause, right? And this is also a conversation that is happening within the Uyghur communities. And there were two independent states existed before 1949. One was in 1934, lasted for 4 years, and then 1944 to 49. So we had established government and for independence, and they got a lot of support from. It's a very complicated situation, and I'm still learning. And so there is I wouldn't say division among Uyghur diaspora as well in terms of what would be the solution for Uyghurs, and is it ever gonna resolve if we stay? So it's like a very bigger question, like how we gonna go about it. And more we wait, and more we lose trust in Chinese government. Period.
I would just add, that the Uyghurs, whereas because they have such a resource-rich land, right? That's the immense targeted persecution from the Chinese Communist Party. But this isn't unique, right? They've been targeting Taiwanese people. They've been targeting Hong Kongers. They've been targeting anyone who's not willing to assimilate. And so it's a pattern. So absolutely, I think there were some of us who do anti-genocide and mass atrocity work that feared that when Putin invaded Ukraine, that Xi Jinping was waiting and was going to shortly after go into Taiwan, and we're still holding our breath. Rabbi Chorney and then Michael.
Two questions. First question I have is, has there ever been a moment in our history where an aggressor, perpetrator of genocide stops for reasons other than being schmeiced by another power?
I would ask Michael.
And the other question I have is, are there any Uyghur traditions or things that it would be good to share with us so that we know more about these things?
Yes, for your first question, I think I'm going to ask.
I feel like I should ask Michael Berenbaum that question. I mean, I'll say that in the conflicts that we've worked in, no, without intervention, right? And actually, in my first meeting with Michael, I said to him, "Is it possible to end genocide? Do you have any hope that this will ever stop?" And I said, "Is there anything that we can do?" And he said, "Yeah," very, very calmly. He's like, "Intervene earlier," right? And I think that intervention is what has to happen. That with this instance in particular, there has to be so much that has to happen, right? We have to think about our purchasing power, but the United States, and we're also, I'll say, we're working with Europe, we're working with the UK, we're working with a lot of different countries to also pass something like the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, but no, we haven't seen anybody stop on their own. I think that if we did intervene sooner, right? We're past a point where maybe economic sanctions, maybe this will stop it, but I honestly don't know.
As far as culture goes, yes. We're religiously, we're Muslims, right? And we kind of found our way to integrate our religion into our culture. And one of the biases among Han Chinese population is that we're like good dancers. We know like how to dance since we were born, right? And it's interestingly enough that's the piece that when Chinese government produced its propaganda videos, you always see Uyghurs with traditional clothing, girls with that braids. I remember when I was little, I have to braid my hair like 20, and dancing happily. So everywhere you see the dancing. And yes, we're good at it because we always dance. We have this instrument. Actually, I have one. I don't know how to play, but it's called dutar. And it's every Uyghur community's house. We have dutar and an instrument that we dance and we sing. And so that's what we're kind of transitioning now because we don't want to lose that. And we're struggling. We're trying to find ways to keep that culture alive because I was, again, one of the luckiest ones in our community that I was able to bring my daughters when I got my passport. When they were 4 years and 7 years old, they're 23 and 20. They don't come with me anywhere anymore. So they were there in Kashgar, and I had such a hard time teaching them Uyghur because we have such a small community, and I was busy and their dad was busy. So I felt really, really bad that I was not able to teach what I know. So once we got there, I just forgot about them. I just gave them away. and nobody would speak English. So they picked up the accent because I speak different accent than other parts of East Turkestan. And they saw and they really, really enjoyed it. They hurt my feelings when they said they liked their dad's side than my dad's side, but it was very, very wonderful experience, and they still remember up to this day. And unfortunately, the children that we have now, my brother's 3 children, they're not able to go back, and we don't know when. So that scared us a lot. That was a wake-up call for all of us. So now we're kind of coming together with intellectuals here in different countries, and we're founding organizations, and we're kind of bringing the historical peace literature and everything into documentation, or publishing our own journals, and teaching our kids our language, our culture. So I hope that someday when we have a culture event, I would love to bring our group to show and showcase and invite you all as well.
And I'll just use this as an excuse to learn more about other Uyghurs. Jewish World Watch's gala is September 18th, and we're honoring Nuri Turkal, who is a Uyghur American who was born in a Chinese internment camp, came here, got his law degree, and is now the chair of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. It's the first time Jewish World Watch is honoring someone whose work so personifies our mission. So there are lots of ways that you can get to know more Uyghurs. And Nurnisa and I worked together in 2021? And we put together, a Uyghur Freedom Seder. So if anybody is interested in seeing that and having a Uyghur Seder where we integrated Jewish and Uyghur cultures, because there are a lot of similarities, we'd be happy to share that. I see you, but Michael Berenbaum had a question, so maybe I can ask the last one.
The leak about concentration camps. And I guess they became very, very aggressive, and the internment was massive. And so then there's no way that the world wouldn't notice and we wouldn't notice. And we were questioning what was happening. And that's where the whole shakeup.
I think there was if I'm not wrong, there were a period of, it was something like 10 days, right, in 2017, where they rounded up.
Mm-hmm.
It was something like 30,000.
Yes.
30,000 people within 10 days, and rounded them up and put them in concentration camps.
And then it became millions, and then 2 million and 3 millions. We don't know exact number.
But Nurnisa, she mentioned this, that they told everybody, they said, you have to, certain people had to report to the police department, and at that point, that's when they rounded people up and took them away.
Yeah, it started, I guess they started that movement end of 2016, because my dad, when he arrived a week later, he was asked to turn in his passport.
I'm seeing the wrap up. Again, I just want to thank everybody for having us. I'm going to put out flyers, and that way, if people are interested in learning more about our work, or want to engage, or want to invite Nurnisa to come and speak or have a conversation, you can do so, and you don't have to write anything down. But again, I just want to thank everybody for allowing us into your community tonight, and especially on such an important holiday where we talk about how our temples fell apart, how our communities fell apart, to hear from Nernisa about how the erosion of a temple starts, and giving us an opportunity to actually do something about it. So again, thank you so much, Shavua Tov.
Thank you so much for having us.
So if there's anybody who's hanging in the fringe, you're more than welcome to come forward because we're going to do Mariv. I appreciate the politeness because there was such a beautiful and emotional conversation going on, but feel free to come on in. And we so appreciate your sharing your story. Nernisa, I want to, I know everybody's going to want to come up to you and tell you stories and share their incredible journeys with you. So I'll just say to everybody else here that I cannot remember for the life of me who said this at the last highest related gathering that we had, but somebody said one of our guests who was a recent arrival from Latin America said that when they come and they visit our synagogue community, what they see is the possibility of what their community could possibly have in refuge 100, 200, or perhaps 2,000 years from now. So let it be the case that the beginnings of the beauty of the Uyghur community can also find what the Jewish community has found, which is beauty also in diaspora. So we're moving now into Tisha B'Av proper, and here's what we're going to do in just a moment. So let me explain how this happens with Shabbat as people are coming in, and feel free to move in and come in. The way that this works is that we utilize the booklets that are on the table that was just uncovered. We won't take the candles just yet. We'll take the candles at exactly 8:30 in 3 minutes. Go ahead and take the booklets. You can make your way over to the table and take with you a booklet. You do not need both booklets. We have both black and pink booklets. It's like having two synagogues. You can have the synagogue that you don't go to, okay? So you can have one of those books. Take either one of the booklets, and there's even an extra keynote booklet in case you want to have the full verses well transliterated for Elitzion. So grab a booklet from the table, and in a few moments, I'll invite you to come forward for for Mariv and then for the reading of Eicha. Many people are going to choose, but not all people will choose, to find a place on the ground for the reading of Eicha itself. We welcome you to either congregate around the brighter lights on the edges, but also to fill in the center here amidst the table. So feel free to come in and fill the center as well.
And a very important thing to me that I wanted to share with everybody is that there are blankets. I asked that they put out blankets because people might be cold. So if you would like a blanket, though we're not supposed to be really comfortable, but we also don't want you to freeze. So if you are cold and you would like to sit on the floor and have a blanket, there are blankets over here in the corner. And Jennifer Lowe promises not to laugh at you for taking one. And you can take them anywhere. Just make sure that you also return them at the end. That was my one announcement.
So in approximately 1 minute, we'll reach the time of Havdalah. And if you would like to, you are welcome to say the words as you light your candle, blessing that candle in Havdalah. We'll also do it. We'll say it with one sentence when we get there, but you can do it individually. You're welcome to do that. Some people like that custom. When we go straight from Shabbat into Tisha B'Av, you can say the blessing because that's all that we do of Havdalah on a Saturday night. And you can head over to the table to go pick up a candle. So I'll call the up as soon as Baruch ends. Let's do the reading. They're going to. I think we said we're going to capture the readers here, so somewhere I'll tell you.
Yeah, the reader should be in the center for the cameras.
Yeah. Are we going to face that way or face that way for the reading? I think we'll face that way for the reading, yeah?
Where do you want us to sit
For the reading, I think somewhere
I think
up
face
in
this
here.
way.
Yeah.
or we have to use the candle?
So I find that this light right here is very bright. So if we can get you sitting there, this camera will get you just I'll put one on a, we'll put this in front of you so you don't have to hold it on.
Am I standing or sitting?
What I'm more comfortable with, but I assume so. Yeah. But I'll get it out.
Okay, great, thank you.
I'm gonna bring my own, you know, everybody else.
Right up in here. Just somewhere up to either this camera or that one. No one's taking me away. This one I find is right.
I feel like it was selfish to have my own, but not offer them to everybody else. This is from Mark and Jessica. I don't know what those are from, to be completely honest. Oh, hi. I was gonna say hi.
I was gonna say not hi.
Well, not yet. I know. I'm seeing you up. Hi. Okay, great. Yeah, yeah. Hello. We've met once. Okay. I don't know.
No, I do. I said
It wasn't a Ramah thing. I mean, we did do Eicha together.
Yeah.
We, a Ramah thing. Did you do Weiner?
no. We wanted to support you if your endeavor was to get people to sit.
Oh, I don't care. I'm gonna sit here because I have to.
This is Aaron. That's my husband.
Okay, wait. You're yes. Okay. Well, that was a whole story in one sentence.
Understood.
I just brought my own blanket down. I felt very selfish being the only person.
At this time, if you're wearing leather shoes, it's the custom to remove them, and you can put them back on so that you don't have to walk home barefoot, but it is the custom to remove them at this time. We'll begin with Baruch Hu. I'll call page numbers as best as I can from both the black and pink booklets. One has larger print, the other has English. I think that's the difference. We'll begin with Baruch Hu. In the pink booklets, we begin on page 7. Oh, it'd be great. Yeah. And we're on page 1 in the black booklet. We begin Mariv standing. After Baruch Hu, you can be seated. And again, as I've mentioned, it is the custom of many not to sit in regular height seatings. You're welcome to sit down on the floor if you're comfortable. There are blankets up here for those who need something beneath them or on them. Vehu rachum yichaper bo velo yashchit v'hirba l'shiva po velo yair kol chamato Adonai Hoshia melech yaneinu yom koreinu Baruchu et Adonai Hamborah. Baruch Adonai Hamborah. Leolam va'ed. You can be seated. El Chai v'kayam tamidim l'kolneinu leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai amariv aravim. Avat olam b'tizar. Ya avat achal tasirni minin leolam hi baruch atah Adonai. Ohev amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael. Adonai Eloheinu. Adonai Echad. Adonai Elohechem Amen. מלכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם משה ובני ישראל לכנו שירה בשמחה רבה ואמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני מי כמוך נדר בקודש נורת אלוהות תוסף אלה מלכותך ראו פניך בוקי הים לפני משה זה עלינו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר כיפת אדוני את יעקב וגלה מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני קהל ישראל. We're on page 10 in the pink booklet and 9 in the black. ושמור צאתנו בואנו לחיים ולשלום מעתה ועד עולם ברוך אתה אדוני שומר עמו ישראל ברוך אדוני כי המלכות שלך היא ולמעט תמלוך בכבוד כי אין לנו מלך אלא אתה ברוך אתה אדוני המלך בכבודו תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד ועל כל מעשיו יקדל ויקדש שמי רבה ועמד דברה קראתי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל בגלה וזמן קריב ואמרו אמן יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם ולעולמי עלמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי תקודשה בריחו לעילם מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירם בעלמה ואמרו אמן. The whispered private Amidah for the end of Shabbat and the beginning of Tisha B'Av is found on page 11 in the pink booklets, 13 in the black booklets. Please be sure to include that special paragraph for the end of Shabbat. If you're still praying your own private Amidah, please continue at your own pace. We're on page 16 in the pink booklet and page 20 in the black. 23 in the black. Yikadal v'yikadash shemiraba, be'alma divra kiriteviam lich malchute, v'chai echon uvyom echon uvchaye d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agala uvizman kari v'imru amen, yehi shemei rabba mevarach le'olam ulalmei omaya, yitbarach v'yishabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yitale v'yitalal, shemei dekudsha berichu, Le'ela minko birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, damiram be'alma v'imru amen. Tikabal tzalot honu vuton, dechol beit Yisrael, kadama v'hondi v'ishmaya v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Osei shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. So, as I light the single candle for my Eicha reading, and kind of just hope for the best with the wind for a second here, I'll say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei meorei ha'esh. And that's it for Havdalah for the moment. We've entered the territory of the end of Shabbat and the beginning of Tisha B'Av. I'll say a few words and invite you to get comfortable, and we'll pass these lighters back. Please be safe and careful, comfortable. Good luck keeping the candles lit. It's okay if they're not. I'm very briefly going to give an introduction to Eicha with the assumption in mind that there's always somebody present who has not experienced Erev Tisha B'Av before. And so I'm going to say this as if it's something new, even if it's not something new to you, even if you've been doing this every year for a long time. I want to add an echo of something that I said on Friday evening. It seems forever ago. That was just last night. A few moments ago, we finished hearing a personal testimonial from a new friend of our community, Nornisa, who is on the board of Uyghur LA, a 300-strong community of Muslim refugees from a part of the world that is under the control of the Chinese government and is experiencing genocide. It's an extraordinary thing to come into the Megillah of Eicha, which we read with no blessings before and no blessings after, but simply as a testimonial to a time when our people experienced a complete and total decimation of our most sacred place. At the end of Tisha B'Av, tomorrow evening, we're going to have an opportunity to hear from someone on behalf of Hayas, which also works with refugees. And one of the questions I asked of Rabbi Megan Doherty, who prepared the source sheet that we're using for tomorrow night, comparing Kabul and Jerusalem and the experiences, was, how can it be that we're supposed to create with these readings of Eicha and the coming together, how are we supposed to open ourselves up to a sense of connectivity when all of our stories of refugee experience are so different? When we hear an incredible testimonial by somebody who still has family in a place where genocide is still taking place, When we think to our own stories of how our family got to this country, every one of them is different. It's just colored differently. We've all lived these different experiences of coming to a new place. So if they're so disparate, because there are people in our community whose families did not come to this country willingly. There are people who are adopted and don't know their family's story. There are people who chose Judaism and their story is completely different. Completely different. So how do we connect with each other when it comes to the story of refugees and resilience? And Rabbi Doherty said, the thing is that we always have and we always will connect through Hamakom Yenachem Etchem B'toch Sha'ara Ve'leit Zion B'Yerushalayim. Even though we don't want to be connected through loss and through destruction, tonight, as we do every year, we come back to the single most shared narrative that we have as a people. It's a really sad narrative, but it's the last time that all of us collectively experienced a loss. Even some of the most extraordinary atrocities that occurred in the past century to our people are not entirely shared by everybody in our community, because we have a totally mixed community that comes perhaps from people who were in Israel during the time of the Shoah, in the Persian community, and we're mixed. We come from all sorts of different stories. But when we look back all the way to the story of Eicha, what we find is connectivity. The challenge with Tisha B'Av, and my charge as you look to Eicha and as you read the story, is to wonder, how do we get back to that place of connectedness? But this time, do it not through a shared story of grief. How do we get back to that place where we can all say we have that shared thread, but that the one thing that we share is not the story of destruction? That is an eternal challenge for our people. We begin with chapter 1 from the book of Eicha. Again, we do not begin with blessings. You can find it in the pink booklets on page 17. Jen's got my back. We're on page 29 in the black booklets. Go for it, and I'm going to adjust this to you.
Eicha yashva vadad, ha'ira batiyam, ha'ita ke'almana, rabati vagoyim, sarati bamdinot, ha'ita lamas, vachotiv ke'balayla, v'dimata alecheya, Ein la menachem mikol ohaveha, kol reiheha bagduva, hayu la lehoivim. Galatu galta Yehuda meonim umerov avoda, hi yashva vagoyim, lo matza manoach, kol rodveha hisiguha ben hametzarim. Darchei Tzion avelot, mi belibo e moed, kol she'areha shomemin, kohaneha ne'anachim, betuloteha nugod vehimar la. Hayut tzareha lerosh oiveha shalu, ki Adonai hoga al rov peshaeha, olaleha. Halchu shevi lifnei tzar, vayetze mibat Zion kol hadara, hayu sareha, kai alim lo matzu mireh, vayachu velo choach lifnei rodev. Zochra Yerushalayim, yemei oneya umerudeha, kol machmudeha,
אשר היו מימי קדם, בנפול עמה ביד צר, ואין עוזר לה, ראו הצרים, שחקו על משפטיה. חטא חטאה ירושלים, על כן לנידה הייתה. כל מכבדיה הזילוה, כי ראו ערוותה. גם היא נאנחה, ותשוב אחור. טומאתה בשוליה, לא זכרה אחריתה. ותרד פלאים, אין מנחם לה. ראה אדוני את עוני, כי הגדיל אויב. ידו פרס צר על כל מחמדיה, כי ראתה הגויים באו מקדשה, אשר ציוויתה. לא יבואו בקהל לך. כל עמן נאנחים מבקשים לחם, נתנו מחמדיהם, באוכל להשיב נפש. ראה אדוני והביטה, כי הייתי זוללה. לא עליכם כל עוברי דרך, הביטו וראו, אם יש מחוב כמחובי, אשר עולה לי, אשר הוגה אדוני, ביום חרון אפו. ממרום שלח אש בעצמותי, וירדנה, פרס רשת לרגלי, השיבני אחור, נתנני שוממה, כל היום דבה. נזכד עול פשעי בידו, יסתרגו, עלו על צווארי, הכשיל כוחי, נתנני אדוני, בידי לא אוכל קום. סילח כל אבירי, אדוני בקרבי, קרא עלי, מועל לשבור בחורי, גת דרך אדוני, לבתולת בת יהודה. עלה אני בוכיה. איני יורד מים, כי רחק ממני, מנחם משיב נפשי. היו בני שוממים, כי גבר אויב, פרסת ציון בידיה. מנחם לה, ציווה אדוני, ליעקב סביביו צריו. הייתה ירושלים לנידה ביניהם. צדיקו אדוני כפיהו מריתי, שימונה כל העמים, וראו מחובי, בתולותי ובחורי הלכו בשבי. קראתי למאהבי, הם הרימוני, כהני וזקני בעיר גבהו, כי ביקשו אוכל למו, וישיבו את נפשם. ראה אדוני כי צר לי מארכם אמרו, נפח ליבי בקיבי, כי מרום מריתי. מחוץ שקלה חרב, בבית כמוות, שם כי ננחה אני. מנחם לי, כל אויבי שמעו רעתי, ששו, כי אתה עשית. הבאת יום קראת, ויהיו כמוני. תבוא כל רעתם לפניך ועולל עמו, כאשר עוללת לי על כל פשעי, כי רבות הנחותי וליבי דווי.
Echa yaiv be'apo Adonai et bat Zion hishlik mishamayim eretz tiferet Yisrael v'lo zachar hadom raglav b'yom apo b'vtzarei vat Yehuda Bila Adonai v'lo hamal et kol neot Yaakov aras bevrato mivtzarei vat Yehuda higia la'aretz chilel mamlacha v'sarecha Gada b'choriav Kol keren Yisrael Eishi v'achor Yemino mipnei oyev Vayivar b'Yaakov Ke'esh lehava Achlas aviv Darak kashto keoyev Nitzav yemino ketzar Vayaharog kol machamadei ayin Be'ohel bat Zion Shafak ha'esh chamato Haya Adonai Keoyev bila Yisrael, bila kol armenotecha, shichet mivtzarav, vayerev bevat Yehuda, ta'aniya, va'aniya, vayachmos kagan suko, shichet moado, shikak Adonai, B'Tzion moed v'shabbat, vayinatz b'za'am apo, melech v'chohen. Zanak Adonai, mizbecho, nier mikdasho, iskir b'yad oyev, homot, armenotecha, kol, natnu b'veit Adonai, keyom moed, chashav Adonai lehashchit, Chomat bat Zion natakav lo heshiv yado mibalea vaya'avel chel v'choma yachdav umlalu tavu va'aret she'arecha ibad v'shiba b'richecha malka v'sarecha v'goyim Ein Torah gam neviecha lo matzu chazon me'Adonai yeshvu la'aretz yitmu ziknei bat Zion he'elu afar al rosham hagru sakim Horidu la'aretz roshan betulot Yerushalayim kalu badmaot enai homar maru me'ai nishpak la'aretz kevedi al shever batami be'atef olel ve'yonek Birchovot kirya le'imotam yomru
Aye dagan vayayin behitat fam kechalal birchovot ir behishtapek nafsham el chek imotam ma'ad elvadek ma'adam elak Abat Yerushalayim Mashvelak Vanachamek Betulat Bat Zion Ki gadol kayam Shivrek Meir Palak Nivyayik Hazulak Shavitafel V'lo gilu al avonek lehashiv shevutek vayechezulak masot shavu maduchim safku alai kapayim kol ovrei derek sharku Vayaniu rosham al bat Yerushalayim vezot ha'ir sheyomru kelilat yofi masos lekol haaretz patsu alaik pihem kol oivaik sharku vayaharku shein amru bilanu akzeh hayom shekivinu matzanu rainu asadonai asher zamam Bitza emrato asher tziva mimekedem haras velo hamal Yasam baisamak alai koyev herim keren sarayik Tza'ak libam el Adonai Homat bat Zion horidi kanach al dima yomam v'layla al titni fukat lak al tidom bat enek kumi roni v'layla l'rosh ashmurot shivchi chamayim libek nochak pnei Adonai sahi elav kapayik al nefesh olalaik ha'atufim bera'av berosh kol chutzot ra'eh Adonai Vehabita lemi olalta ko im tochalna nashim piryam olele tipuchim im yechareg b'mikdash Adonai kohen v'navi shachvu la'aretz chutzot nar v'zaken betulotai v'achurai naflu v'chareb harakta b'yom apecha tavakta lo hamalta tikra cheyom moed megurai misaviv velo haya Beyom Adonai palit v'sarit asher tipakti v'ribiti oivi chilam.
So this is the this is the third chapter Am I reading is somebody else who's on for the third chapter tonight? No, it is me. Okay. Just want to make sure. It's been Shabbat. So the third chapter, the first four of Eicha is a book of 5 chapters. The first 4 chapters are alphabetical acrostics, Aleph to Taf. But the third chapter is a special acrostic because it's a triplicate acrostic. So there was a tune that was developed to allow us to move through the chapter and to move through it, each of the parts of the acrostic, the first, the second, and then the third verse of each of the letters. And I used that tune in Mariv, and now I'll use that tune here to move us through the chapter. So we're on page 21 in the pink booklet. 37. That answers the question that somebody is using that black booklet. Okay. Ani hagevir ani v'shevet evrato otina ha v'yolech choshech v'lor ach v'yashuv yafoch yado kol hayom bila pesari v'ori shibarat motai Analav Yaakov Roshut La V'machashakim Hoshivani Ymeitei Olam Gadar Badi V'lo Etzei Chichbi Nechashti Gam Ki Ezak Vashavea Satam Tefilati Gadar Jerachai Begazit Netivotai va Dovorevuli Arya b'misitarim Rachai sorer Vaifashecheni Samani shomeim Tarach kashto v'yativeni Kamatara lachetz Hevi kechiliotai B'nei ashvato Hayiti sechok lecholami Neginatam kol hayom Hisviani v'amerorim Irvani lana Yagreim v'chatzat shinai Hichvishani v'efer Vatiznach mishalom nafshi nashiti tova V'omar avad nitzchi V'tochalti Adonai Zechar onye umruti lana varosh Zachor tizkor Vatashichai alai nafshi Zot ashiv el livi Al keinochi Chaste Adonai Ki lo tamnu Ki lo chalu rachamav Chadashim la bekarim Rabbi munatecha Chelekei Adonai amra nafshi Alekein ochil lo Tov Adonai Lekorav nefesh tir deshenu Tov v'yachil v'dumham lid shuat Adonai Tov lagever Ki yisa ol binura Yeshiv badav yidvom kinital alav Yitein be'afar pihu Ulai yesh tikva Yitein limakehu Lechi yispa becherpa Hilo yiznach leolam Adonai Ki hogam vericham kerov chasadav Hilo hinavilipo ve'agevenish L'rakei tachat raglai kol asirei aretz Lehatot mishpat gaver neged penei elyon Le'avet adam berivohu Adonai lora Mi ze'amar vatehi Adonai lo tziva Mi pi elyon lo teitzei arot ve'hatov Ma hitonei nadam chai Gever al chatov נח בסד דרכינו, ונחקרה, ונשובה עד אדוני, נישא לבבינו, אל כפיים, אל בשמיים, אנחנו פשענו ומרינו, אתה לא סלחת. צעקות עבר ותרדפנו, הרגת לא חמלת. סקותה ונלך מעבור תפילה, שחי ומעוז, תשימנו בקרב עמים. פצו עלינו פיהם כל אויבינו, פחד ופחד היה לנו השט והשבר. פלגי מים תרדני, על שבר בדמי. איני נגרע ולא תדמה מן הפוקות, עד ישקיף וירא אדוני משמיים. איני עוללה לנפשי מכל בנות עירי. צוד צדוני כציפור אויבי חינם, צמתו הבור חיי וידעו אבן בי. צפו מים על ראשי, אמרתי נגזרתי. קראתי שמך אדוני מבור תחתיות, קולי שמעת, אל תלם אוזנך לרווחתי לשבתי. קרבת ביום אקראך, אמרת אל תירא. רבת אדוני ריבי נפשי, גאלת חיי. ראית אדוני עבדתי, שבת משפטי. ראית כל נקמתם, כל מחשבותם לי. שמעת חרפתם אדוני, כל מחשבותם עלי. שפתי קמי והגיונם עלי כל היום. שבתם וקימתם אביתה, אני מנגינתם. תשיב להם גמול, אדוני כמעשה ידיהם. תיתן להם מגינת לב, תלתך להם. תרדוף ביה ותשמידם מתחת שמי אדוני.
איכה יום זהב, ישנה הכתם הטוב. תשתפכנה אבני קודש בראש כל חוצות. בני ציון היקרים, המסולאים בפז. איכה נחשבו לנבלי חרס, מעשה ידי יוצר. גם תנים חלצו שד, הניקו גוריהם. בתמי לאחסר, כי עיניים במדבר. דבק לשון יונק, על חיכו בצמא. עוללים שללו לחם, פורס אין להם. האוכלים למעדנים, נשמו בחוצות. האמונים עלי תולה, חיבקו אשפתות. ויגדל עוון בתמי, מחטאת סדום. הפוכה כמו רגע, לא חלו בידיים. זכו נזיריה משלג, צחו מחלב. אדמו עצם מפנינים, ספיר גזרתם. חשך משחר תרם, לא נגרו בחוצות. צפד אורם על עצמם, יבש היה כעץ. טובים היו חללי חרב, מחללי רעב. שהם יזובו מדוכרים, מתנובות שדי. ידי נשים רחמניות בישלו ילדיהם היו לברות למו בשבר בת עמי כי לאדוני את חמתו שפך ארון אפו ויצאת אש בציון ותאכל יסודותיה לא האמינו מלכי ארץ כל יושבי תבל כי יבוא צר ואויב בשערי ירושלים מחטאת נביאיה עוונות כהניה השופכים בקרבת דם צדיקים נאו עברים בחוצות נגואלו בדם ולא יאכלו ייגעו בלבושיהם סורו טמא קראו למו סורו אל תיגעו כי נצו גם נאו אמרו בגויים לא יוסיפו לגור בני אדוני חלקם לא יוסיף להביטם בני כהנים לא נשאו וזקנים לא חננו עודנו תכלנה עינינו על עזרתנו האבל בציפיותינו ציפינו אל גוי לא יושיע צדו צעדינו מלכת ברחובותינו קרב קיצנו מלאו ימינו קיבו קיצנו קלים היו רודפינו מנשרי שמיים אל ההרים דלקונו במדבר ערבו לנו רוח אפינו משיח אדוני נלכד בשחיתותם אשר אמרנו בצילו נהיה בגויים שישי ושמחי בת אדום יושבת ברצוץ גם עלייך תעבור כוס תשכרי ותתארי תם עוונך בציון לא יוסיף להגלותך פקד עוונך בת אדום גילה חטאותייך
זכור אדוני מהיה לנו הביטה וראה את חרפתנו נחלתנו נהפכה לזרים בתינו לנוכרים יתומים היינו ואין אב אמותינו כאלמנות ממנו בכסף שתינו אצלנו במחיר יבואו על צווארנו נרדפנו יגענו ולא הונח לנו מצרים נתנו יד אשור לסבוע לכם עוונותינו חטאו ואינם ואנחנו עוונותיהם סבלנו עבדים משלו בנו פורק אין מידם בנפשנו נביא לחמנו מפני חרב המדבר. אורנו כתנור נחמהו מפני זלעפות רע. נשים בציון אינו בתולות וערי יהודה. שרים בידם נתלו, מפני זקנים לא נהדרו. בחורים תיכון נשאו, ונערים בעץ כשלו. זקנים משער שיבתו, בחורים מנגינתם. שבת משוש ליבנו, נהפך לאבל מחולנו. נפלה עטרת ראשנו, אוי נא לנו, כי חטאנו. על זה היה דברי ליבנו, על אלה השכו עינינו. על הר ציון ששמם שועלים הלכו בו. אתה אדוני לעולם תשב, כיסאך לדור ודור. למה לנצח תשכחנו, תעזבנו לאורך ימים. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה, חדש ימינו כקדם. כי מאוס מאסתנו, קפצת עלינו עד מאוד. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה, חדש ימינו כקדם.
Those who are able are invited to rise as we turn to the elegy Elitzion, to the poem that we sing this time of year. You can find the full poem in the back of the white Tisha B'Av keynote booklets. You can find part of it transliterated in its chorus, so to speak, on page 48 of the black booklet. And you can find it in the back of I think in the very far back also of the pink booklet, but also not in its entire, yes, on page 139. Most is present as well. It's nice and big, but it's not transliterated. And the entire poem is found at the end of page 28 at the end of the keynote booklets. Elitzion be'areha כמו אישה בצירך וכיבתו לך גורתך נעוריך עלי ארמון אשר נוטש בהשמצון אתריך בהביאת בחרפי אל יתוך מקדש אתריך עלי גלות משרתי אל נעים shir zimarecha ve'al damam asher shuvach kimo meimei yehorecha alei egyon mecholecha asher damam be'arecha ve'havai asher shamam uvitus an hedreha alei zivchei temiteha ufid yonei bechorecha vihachilu keleicha umizbeach ketorecha alei tapei melachecha b'nei David gevirecha v'hayofya asher chashach v'yitzaru ketarecha alei charvot asher kala v'eit charvot devirecha v'halachaytz asher lachatz v'sam sakim chagorecha alei hashnas v'rov makot asher huku nezirecha v'hal niput zelizela avileha neharecha alei simchat Misanecha, Vesacheka Mosrevrecha, Vehalinui Venei Chorin, Nediveha Tehorecha, Alei Fesha Asher Havata, Salho Derecha Shurecha, Vihal Tzvehot Kehaleha, Shezufecha shechorecha, alei kolot mechorfecha, veit rabo v'gyarecha, v'hal rikshat mikardfecha, v'toch mishkan chatzerecha, alei shimcha asher hulal, v'vika mei mitzarecha, Ve'hatachai nitzachulach, Geshavdu shma hamarecha, Eli Tzion be'harecha, Kemo isha betzirecha, Hivtu lach aguratzak, We return to Mariv. We can put down those Kino booklets. If you're in the black booklet, we turn to page 49 for the continuation of the service with the words V'ata Kadosh. In the pink booklet, we're on page 31. V'ata kadosh yoshev tilot Yisrael v'kara ze el ze v'amar kadosh 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 Adonai tzvaot melech haaretz kevodo. V'tisaini ruach v'shma acharai kol rash gadol baruch kevod Adonai mi mekomo. Now you look, Melabed. V'yiftechu b'cha yodei shemecha ki lo azavta doreshecha Adonai. Adonai chafetz leman tzidko yagdil Torah v'yadir. Yit gadal v'yit kadash shemei rabbah. Be'alma divrach irute v'yamlich malchute. B'chayechon v'yomechon v'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael. Ba'gadla v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shemei rabba mevarach le'olam ulamei amaya. Yit barach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yit hadar v'yit aleh v'yit halal shemei dekudisha berichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata damiram be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Aleinu is at the bottom of page 33 in the pink booklets. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lamelech al kol haaretz bayom hahu yicheh Adonai echad u'shmo echad. In the pink booklet, we're on page 34 for Mourner's Kaddish. We're on page 55 in the black book. In the black booklet. Yit gadal v'yit kadash shemei rabbah. Be'alma divra chirute v'yamlich malchute. B'chayechon v'yomechon uv'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael. Ba'agala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shemei rabba mevarach le'olam ulamei omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudsha berichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechamata damiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Just two quick announcements before we go. The first is that on Tisha B'Av, as many of you know, we do not greet as we leave. We don't schmooze, we don't talk. It's an odd thing to do, it's uncomfortable to do, but it's a thing that we do so that we can remain in this place of meditative focus. And before he disappears too far, the second thing is we have an opportunity to do something that we don't often have to do, which is to go from the general to the particular. So Chaim, before you go too far, you're here tonight. Are you also here with your brother? No, it's you. Okay, so we have an opportunity to do something particularly special. So while we're not ending this evening with greeting, we are going to end this evening by returning to those words that we started with, which are the words from our tradition that we take from this collective time of grief, and we turn and we share with love with those who are particularly grieving. On Friday, just before Shabbat, Chaim had the honor and the merit of burying his mother of 104 years. And so he is in Shiva, and he's just left Shabbat, only to enter Tisha B'Av, a collective experience of grief for the entire community. But you're not forgotten in this, Chaim. You are one person in a collective web in this community who is here with you and is holding you in your Shiva and in this grief. And so we say to you, this entire community all together, Hamakom Yenachem Erchem B'toch Sha'ar Avelei Tzion V'Yerushalayim. Chaim, may this place and may the divine be a comfort to you among all of the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. May your mother's long-lasting legacy and memory be for a blessing. I encourage you to check your email for details regarding continuing Shiva observances for Chaim's mother. What was her name again? Gertrude. I wanted to get that right, Gertrude. Tomorrow morning, if you'd like to join us for more readings for Morning Minyan and for more readings of Eicha and Keynote, we begin at 8 a.m. here.
have their candles lit, so you might actually, I don't know if you need an announcement about that.
Yeah, maybe we'll just like encourage people to blow them out. Yeah. We encourage you to blow out any candles that might be lit and to dispose of them carefully.
If you could put your Tisha B'Av books on the table that they came from, it'll help our maintenance crew know to